Okay. Good, I need that. Counting on you.
You're all set.
I'm gonna stand up? No, okay. Hello? Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this rainy evening. My name is Ashley Devenish Robinson. I'm the Director of Career Services here at Sotheby's Institute. And we're going to have an amazing conversation today. I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves in just a moment. But I just kind of wanted to gauge where the audience is. This is a careers panel. And I wanted to see where you all might be in a job search. How many of you are currently looking for a job? Yeah, that's quite a few of you. And how many are looking for a job specifically in the art world? Okay, and anyone in the interview process currently? I see a few of you, and I know you're in the interview process. And how many of you are already employed? So maybe job searching and you already have a job. Great, okay. What do you feel is like the biggest challenge as you approach your job search? And if you shout out an answer, raise your hand, shout out your answer, and I'll repeat it back so that everybody can hear. But if anyone has any certain challenges they want to point out. No? Is everyone, you feel like you're an expert, you know how to approach your potential employers? Well, we're going to hopefully answer any of those questions that you have out there today. I'm going to go down the line here. We have an amazing crew with us. How many of you search for jobs on NYFA or Art Frankly? I think I would see every hand up in the room. Well, we're very lucky today to have some panelists from those organizations. But first, I'm going to start with Molly, who's with NYFA. Just want to make sure this is on and working. Great.
Hello. Oh. Hello. Molly Martin. I work for the New York Foundation for the Arts, as mentioned, and I manage the Classifieds program, which is jobs, opportunities, and spaces in the arts. I'm the senior manager of advertising and data strategy there, so working with both advertisers looking to find individuals to work for them within the arts, and also artists and arts professionals looking to break into that field. So it's an exciting place to be, and Classifieds is an awesome resource that I'm looking forward to talking about with everyone.
Thank you. Do you want to use mine?
I do want to break this right off the bat. Hi, I'm Tim Cynova. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for an arts service organization called Fractured Atlas. We work with artists, creatives, and makers of all stripes, from visual artists, performing artists, radio, television, 3D makers, sort of you name it. If you see yourself as an artist or a creative, we help you with the things you need to succeed as small businesses and entrepreneurs. Things like fiscal sponsorship, various types of insurances, Space Finder for rehearsal and performance space. We have something called Artfully that allows you to ticket your events, track your fans. We do something called Artist Campaign School that trains artists to run for elected office. And increasingly, we're doing work around people-centric organizational design. So that's sort of my domain around creating really great places where people can thrive. In addition to that, I'm on faculty at the New School, where I teach leadership and team building and the entrepreneurship program. I'm on faculty at the Banff Center for Arts and Creativity, where I teach strategic HR or people-centric organizational design. And I'm increasingly doing work with our consulting arm called Work Shouldn't Suck, which is exactly that, figuring out how we can make work suck less, or not at all, for that matter. So that's me.
Great. Thank you. I think you just, there you go.
I feel like you're going to break in at that point.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming out. My name is Josie Hines. I'm the co-founder of Art Frankly, which is a jobs platform for people searching in the arts. What we do is try to allow for a type of environment like LinkedIn, but that encompasses just the network in the fine arts. And so really give you guys your own space and allow job posters to come find a qualified candidate pool. We'll get more into this as we go, but I have about 4 other jobs. I work at a huge digital agency in advertising. I run a small cannabis-focused digital agency. And I'm a consultant for a number of other small businesses. So we'll talk about that a little bit, how I got into each of those and what I think is some good advice for you all as we go. Thanks.
Hi everyone.
Yep.
Hi everyone. I'm Hillary Burchfield. I founded an arts recruiting and executive search company about 2 years ago. Before that, had experience mostly on the commercial side of the art world, in the gallery world and auction world. So excited to speak with you all.
Great. Thank you so much. I just want to start with the question of what motivates each of you to do what you do and to get involved in the areas that you're involved in, because being an ally for job seekers is kind of unique. And I just want to hear from, maybe we can start with you, Hillary, because what you do is just, it's such a handheld, one-on-one service that you provide. And what is the greatest motivation for you in your work?
I'd say the greatest motivation for me is really making those connections between candidates and companies that otherwise may not be made. People that are motivated and making those really great connections is a benefit to both, my clients, these companies, as well as the candidates, and helping them kind of meet their full potential as people, as companies. And I love the sort of personal nature of that, and really getting to know the people that I'm working with is always very rewarding. So,
what would you say, when you're working with companies, when they come to you, what is like kind of that primary thing that they ask you, the thing that keeps repeating itself that becomes a pattern when they're looking for a candidate?
Essentially just people that are willing to put in the work. I think the art world, the fine arts industry can be very glamorous, but it also is a lot of hard work, and the people that succeed, tend to be the people that are willing to get their hands dirty, and no task is too small. Even at the very highest levels, they're just working for people that really love the art, love the artists, and are motivated by that. And just really willing to work hard. A lot of times people aren't as willing to maybe put themselves out there as a candidate, so it's sometimes up to me to go out and search and find people that may be willing to move that otherwise wouldn't make themselves available.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Josie, do you find, I'm curious, what's your biggest motivation getting involved with Art Frankly, but do you find a similar sort of thing with the employers that you work with?
Yeah, to answer the last question first, yes. It's
Yeah.
really, it's a nice feeling to go through, to make these kind of connections, and like what Hillary just said. It's really fulfilling, and it's nice to help people move forward in their careers, and it's also really nice to help out the galleries or auction houses or museums or whoever our clients are, fill positions open with really qualified candidates that we've helped them find. But then my general interest in why I wanted to and love working on Art Frankly, my co-founder, Carlina, who unfortunately couldn't be here, she came up with the idea in 2014 while I was still in business school, and I was actually in the middle of doing my own job hunting. So it resonated with me, and I'm a person who very much likes to build things, to see the fruition at the end of a project. And anywhere from the film work I used to do to white papers we used to write at the World Economic Forum, finally building this platform, I find it incredibly satisfying to come up with an idea and go through all the steps from the first ideation, just putting words on paper, to taking next steps and talking to more people about it, bringing in other experts and developing that into a broader idea before finally bringing in the building blocks around whatever the project may be to putting it together. So that was super fulfilling for me, and now running the company itself, I feel like we're building a job market, and so
and you created something that's like truly giving back to a community in such an important and meaningful way.
That's right, and we like to partner with a lot of organizations that benefit the art world more broadly, and we do so very happily.
Wonderful. And Tim, how about you? What motivated you to get involved in all the many things that you were involved in?
I don't know. I just keep saying yes, and you're like, how the fuck am I
Fell
involved
into
with so
it.
much? I grew up as a classical musician. I was a trombonist. I have a degree in music history. I lucked into running dance companies in New York City, and then into this role at Fractalis. And before I had this role, I was like textbook nonprofit viewpoint. This is how a nonprofit arts organization is supposed to run. And I've been with Fractalis for now a decade, and my view has completely changed. Thankfully, I was really introduced to some amazing people who do work in people-centric organizational design, organizational behavior, organizational psychology. That really pushed me to say, like, yeah, that's like received wisdom, that's like conventional wisdom, but that's not at all what research says you should do to make a great place to work. That actually is pretty shitty the way they do it. And people just keep doing it because that's what you do. It's what we know, yeah. So, and like, I learned how to interview from like watching movies, and like you should not learn from watching The Office about how to run a good organization or watching movies. And it sort of got to this place where I realized that. Most arts organizations are really shitty places to work. Like, the missions are amazing. Like, we're trying to change the world. We're trying to make the world a better, more beautiful place, and we do it largely by burning through the people who want to help. And that's probably not unique to like organizations in general, but it's heightened when you're talking about nonprofit organizations and the mission base that they have. And like, life is really short. And we want to make an impact. We want to make our dents in the universe. And I think it's if you are a leader, for wherever you lead from, it's incumbent upon you. It's important that this is part of what you do. You help people grow to their potential, or not necessarily grow, but just set the conditions so that people can do that. And if you don't do that, you're a really shitty leader. And so a lot of times, though, it's like you just don't know how to do it. So this is where I found like both my life purpose and passion aligns with like, well, how actually do you make a place less racist?
Yeah.
How do you hire better? How do you make it less oppressive? What does that actually look like? Because there's not a lot of places where you can turn to say like, here are the steps that you can follow. And so that's really where my life purpose aligns with why I'm interested in the work.
Yeah, well, and I want to jump into some of that, and then I'm going to come right back to you, Molly. But jumping into, this is at the end of my list of questions, but you've gone there. Were there certain policies or things that you do in your consulting with these employers around hiring practices? I mean, you describe challenging places to work. Like, what are some of the things that are easily implemented, and particularly in terms of like hiring practices? What would you consult a company in that aspect? What would you say to them?
It depends. It's usually what I say. It depends where you are, where you want to go, what you have available to you. We all have resource constraints. So what do you think is going to be the biggest impact? Where do you want to be in 5 years? What does it look like to work at this organization in 5 years? What does it look like now? And then how can you get from here to there? And we have to make trade-offs.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, if it's specifically about hiring, we talk about like bias. And those questions you think are really good are really biased. And if you can't check that bias, then you're jettisoning really great candidates because you have sort of you're getting the false positives, or you're jettisoning the false negatives, I guess, through your process. So look at it. But I've been there. Like, I was really shitty at hiring. Like, I did it like I thought I was supposed to do it, and it was only like, all right, we're like firing every other person we hire. We only find the same people we have. So we have to get better at this in order to change our organization, and we oftentimes don't have time. Like, the person left yesterday, I need someone today. So if you just quickly get someone in, it's like we don't have time to step back and say, who do we need? What are the knowledge, skills, and abilities that they possess? What are the questions? How's the process created? So that at the end of this process, we end up with people who actually fit that, and not just because they like bourbon and we like bourbon. Okay, great. But you have no financial expertise, and we're hiring a finance person. So, so that's what I usually would say to start with.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Molly, maybe you can share with us your work that you do with NYFA, what motivated you. And I do want to dig into the classified sections. That's somewhere I visit on a daily basis.
Oh, I'm glad to hear it.
I think many people in here do as well.
And if you don't, hopefully you will by the end of this. So I think my motivation in getting started or passionate about the arts was I was just fortunate enough to be encouraged to draw and paint growing up, and was always taking classes, and really admired and had the best. It felt like the environment in art courses, whether it was the professor or the teacher, the environment they created was one that I really enjoyed and looked forward to, and that creative mind was one that I really appreciated, and I recognized quickly the hard work that goes into being an artist, and making your practice profitable. So kind of the data mind in me, or the more analytical mind, was interested in not becoming an artist, but figuring out how to support those teachers I'd had that created such an interesting environment, and recognizing quickly how important across tons of different industries it is, as we all know, to have creative thinkers. So coming from it at a kind of a business angle, that affected the way my career progressed, which I can talk about as well later. I know some of the questions kind of touch on that, but yeah, I think especially in the nonprofit world right now, we are lucky at the end of the day. I have so many peers that graduated and didn't feel passionate about something. So as an artist or an arts administrator, while yes, you do end up in an organization that may kind of run you to the ground or take full advantage of that passion, it's really exciting, and we're fortunate that we feel excited. But I felt really lucky when I had a friend that was maybe interested in math, but you're not passionate about math necessarily, and we get to go to art museums and be a part of this art world that is this incredible community. So that passion, once I realized I had that, was something I wanted to really capitalize on and make a career out of it that felt, they say at the end of the day, you want to have a job that doesn't feel like a job. And so the arts, I think, if you can finagle it properly and use NYFA classifieds, you can find a role that works for you and takes advantage of that. So
yeah, I mean, and what I'm hearing from all of you is, and myself, I'm going to include in this, everyone's really passionate about helping job seekers and helping people specifically looking to pursue careers in the arts. I hope it's clear that we have allies here that are doing this as a profession. And on that note, I mean, what are some of the tips you would give to a job seeker in utilizing your services, but also trends that you see out there? Forbes last year said one of the top 5 skill sets is creativity. I think another one was empathy. Do you see that in practice? Like, what do you see? What are people looking for? We touched on it briefly just before, but maybe we can go down and just talk about that a little bit.
I thought about this question a little bit. I think one way to figure out what people are looking for is to read the jobs. Go through NYFA classifieds. If you're an entry-level, potential employee at this organization, go through and if you have this dream job in your head and your resume isn't ready yet, go through that classifieds list, find your job that 3 to 4 years from now you'd love to be in. Read what they're looking for. It's right there waiting for you. They're looking for X, Y, Z. They will tell you. And if you don't have it now, and maybe it's, so in my case, I worked for a digital advertising agency that was very much for profit, not in the art world, right out of school, because I wanted that skill set that I knew would translate into helping an arts organization. So, back into it, think about what you want in 3 or 4 years and what that job looks like, read about what they want, and then figure out how to get those skills. It doesn't have to necessarily, in my mind, start in another industry if you need to, but know that you may work your way back into the art world. Be open to getting those skills wherever they lie, and then you can be that much stronger and bring that much more to the arts.
And I think we forget about transferable skills. I think often in my conversations with people, it's not realizing or understanding that they have a skill set, and it's how do you apply that to the job that you're applying for.
One of the things I like to do is just go on LinkedIn. Like, you want a curator job, like search for curators and see what they list, see what kind of backgrounds they have, how they talk about their work. Especially if you're trying to make a change from one thing to the next, you might have those skills, but you might be talking about them in a way that doesn't immediately transfer. And if someone doesn't know that thing is really what they're looking for, you need to do that work in advance. I think the thing to think about first, though, is we all probably have friends, people we know who go from job to job and they hate it. Like, something's always wrong with it. My wife is a public school teacher. She's had countless friends who are like, every 2 years at a different school, it's always because of the principal, or it's because of the employee culture or something like that. And you're like, okay, well, maybe it's not that you've just had 5 bad principals in a row. I mean, maybe, but this is where some deep introspective work comes into play. Before you quit your job, before you look for a job, think about what it is you want. Why do you want that? I mean, the research is pretty stark when it talks about from a pay raise. the positive psychic benefits of a pay raise last 15 days. So that's one pay period. So if you hated your job before you got a pay raise, you're going to like your job for one pay period, and then you hate your job again. It also talks about the average, when people say I left my job for more money, the average is 3%. So it's money. Everyone's going to take more money, but it's not massive amounts of money usually. What is it about it? Maybe you actually have a decent job in interviewing. You're like, actually, I really like it. Or maybe you can use a skill like job crafting to say how can I think about the work that I do differently? How might I trade tasks with someone else? I hate this, you love this, let's switch. So that the job you have might be the job that you want to stick with. But it's not doing that work. You're like, okay, I hate my job. I'm not getting paid enough. They don't value me. All right, well, maybe. But then you might end up someplace else and you're like, all right, I hate my job. They don't value me. I'm not getting paid enough. And then you just bounce from job to job, which there's value in that. You learn over time. But sitting down and thinking, what are those things before I actually send in my resume, before I start to interview, I think it's helpful for us to know ourselves, what we value. Which would I rather have a supervisor who takes an interest in me as a professional in my career, or an extra $1,000? And that might be a real, that might be a real trade-off that you have to make. That $1,000 might come with someone who could care less who you are. So these are things to think about before you actually get into the process, because when it comes down to it, looking at organizational culture, is that a place where I want to work? Does it look like people talk to each other? Has anyone laughed the entire time I've been in this building? And then those are things that we can start to pick up to say, actually, this bucket is what I care about. These are the things I can make trade-offs on, and these are deal breakers.
Yeah, and would you say approaching a job search and approaching any conversation with a potential employer, knowing those things about yourself actually makes you a more confident applicant, and that carries over. I often think of an interview as much of an interview of the organization as it is of me, and it's keeping some of those things in mind as well. Oh, yeah, no, go ahead, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of judging an organization by its cover, just to pick up data that you can then use in your question. When they're like, you have any questions? You can actually flip it over. Yes, we walked in here. I've never been in this space before. I started to make assumptions about what's it like being here? Have I seen anyone working? Are there cubicles? Is it open space? Are people laughing? Are people having a good time? Is there free food? And then when they're like, well, are there any questions you want to know? You have these data points that you can be do people have a good time here? But I was really probably not the best question to ask, but you get the point. So I think it's just data that we're picking up. It might not at all be the case. Everyone might be on vacation, which is why you don't see anyone there, or someone might have just died, which is why no one's laughing. But they're data points that it happens, but they're data points that we can pick up and then interrogate in order to see is this someplace where I could work? Is this someplace where I can thrive?
Yeah, those are all really great points, I think, and both of you gave me a lot to blurt out now, so I'll go ahead and do that. First, on resume vocabulary and job vocabulary, it is super, super, super important that you guys understand exactly what you're applying for. You reread the job description a million times so that you're not asking them a question that's listed on there and that you have prepared answers. Now, on the actual vocabulary you use on your resume, I would 100% every time you're applying for a new job, run it by someone else and show them the job description. Is it matching? Is the vocabulary matching? Is the tone matching? Are you really encapsulating your certain skills and experiences in a way that they'll understand? So now, to back up my own career, my first job out of college, more or less, was working in film for about 4 years. And I was basically, like we were talking about backstage before, I was basically a project manager. It wasn't called that, but it was, and I was organizing about 10 distinct groups of professionals who all knew how to do things that I don't know how to do, but I helped maintain the project in a way, maintain the teams in a way that allowed for the films to stay on schedule and stay on budget. Obviously, in my low 20s, it was a low-level, entry-level job, but nonetheless, those skills were there. I didn't realize I was gaining all these skills. I thought I was just organizing the extras and keeping the cast informed of what was going on, and et cetera, et cetera. What didn't translate in my mind. So when I was applying finally for a job at the World Economic Forum and for business school, when I ran by my resume by a few colleagues or friends of mine, they started retooling my resume, be like, no, this means that. And it fit more into where I was trying to go, as opposed to where I came from. So maybe someone in the film industry would be like, this is not film work, but where I was trying to go, suddenly that sounded a lot more appealing to them. So that helped me there. And then in business school, we did the same thing over again, where I had an advisor who sat down with me and went through every single one of my experiences, had me explain exactly what I was doing. And then she said, all right, again, like, you can retool this entire resume. And suddenly my resume was looking wildly different in 2014 than it was in 2011 when, like, there were 5 years, nothing material happened in that time. But suddenly the descriptions changed completely, and that really opened the door to certain jobs. And if I hadn't done that, I don't think I would have had the opportunities I had. Now, then finally getting to, like, the arts. Use NYFA, use Art Frankly on a daily basis, use LinkedIn, but it's not as useful. Send jobs to friends you think that will fit their description. I can't tell you how many times we have had clients post jobs on our site where not enough people applied right away. Like, there are jobs on our site where people are not applying to them. So what we end up doing, and why clients find Art Frankly valuable, is that when our clients contact us and say, we're looking for this kind of person, no one's applying for our job, we then go into our database, because people have profiles on Art Frankly like LinkedIn, and we have access to all that data. So I can then filter our entire 15,000 person network down to people who have these specific skills and live in this specific area. I can then email them directly and say, hey, you must have missed this job because it's right. So all these things are necessary to go in with, but the biggest one, and Carlina, my co-founder, does something similar to Hillary. She's much fresher, greener at the industry, but I can't tell you how many times a week I get a text from her, because we talk continuously. We've been best friends since we were 11, by the way. So we not only business partners, but we talk and talk and talk. She texts me multiple times a week being like, you're not going to believe what this candidate did. And it's showing up to a meeting unprepared, where they hadn't read what the job description was fully. They didn't know what Art Frankly was. They didn't know anything about Carlina's background. Do some research. It takes an hour before you show up at a job interview or meeting, whatever. Even if it's just a casual meeting, just Google the person, see if any news has come up recently. Know what's going on at the institution you're trying to get into. What fair were they at recently, if it's a gallery? What press? Anything. I had a meeting with a potential investor for Art Frankly, and I obviously Googled her. We'd met multiple times, but I Googled her again just in case. And it turned out she had sold her company for $500 million that morning. And we were on the phone 30 minutes after it came out. And so I said, congratulations to her. She said, how the hell did you know that? It's because I took 10 minutes and did a little research. Google.
Here we go. I have a question for you, Josie. Is there a connection that occurred through the use of your site that really stands out to you? I mean, I know you have large numbers, but maybe when you just got started, or something that really stands out that was like a super win, just really gratifying.
Yeah, I think does everyone know the company Arda, Ship Arda?
Yes.
Shipping logistics company in the arts. It's kind of like a kayak for shipping. So you could just type in what you're shipping and to where and when, and they'll come back with 5 quotes from different companies. Anyway, it's a startup. They started up right around the time we did, and they've been hiring consistently through us, and I think 3 out of their 10 permanent staff were through us. That was a good feeling. But the best one was more recently. I was traveling somewhere. It was in London, and I was talking to someone I'd met in the airport, and they was explaining to them what I do, and he's like, oh, no, I know Art Frankly. And I said, that's great, that's really nice. He said, no, we actually just hired someone. And this is a completely random a case, and that was just super satisfying.
Yeah. And what you were saying about just throwing this out there, when my students apply to a job and there's a typo in the application, or they make a faux pas, I hear about it from the employers. I get a phone call. I'd say 25% of my phone calls are those phone calls.
So when Carlina does headhunting, she'll throw a resume away if there's an issue on it.
Yeah.
There cannot be.
I can't. It's so crucial. If you're applying to Arda, don't write Dear Sotheby's, which happens a lot.
Yeah. Then the last little piece of advice is something Carlina says all the time as well, but it's applicable to my own career. Nothing should be below you ever. Yeah. I'm a director at a gigantic agency in Midtown. This morning I was on my hands and knees for 2 hours pinning designs onto a pinup board just so that our creatives could get their job done 50% quicker, maybe. And so that, I did not find that below me. I felt that was helping the project in a way that was valuable, and so I just did it. Another example, in the film industry, I was working in Puerto Rico in 2009, and we were doing a 30-day shoot on their porch. They have really big porch there. Someone had to go down to figure out how we were going to get passes for the entire crew, and I volunteered, not because I particularly wanted to, because I thought it would be interesting. And now I suddenly know the ins and outs of a gigantic port in a U.S. city, and I understand how to get people passes to get on there. And will I ever use this again? Maybe, maybe not. But it was a skill that I could throw on my back suddenly, and I can talk about that if there's ever a situation where we need to deal with things like that. And I'm not saying go work on a port, but I think you get my point, which is that you never know what experience is going to offer you down the road, and when you do something once, suddenly it's experience on your resume or elsewhere. So I would keep your eyes open and be willing to do anything.
Pretty much going to reiterate what has been touched on here by everyone, but to kind of put it into maybe 4 points. First of all, definitely set your parameters for what you want. Those can be small, they can be narrow or wide. If you, even as small as wanting to work on a small team versus a big team, or having a list of things that are non-negotiables, things that might be nice and things that you absolutely need. Something like that. Just so when you go into it, or when I work with people, I like to have some sense of if they have any direction about something they want, rather than just saying, I just want a job in the art world. I think that will guarantee more success in the long run. Number 2, the resume thing, I can't stress enough. I mean, there should not be one single mistake on a resume. There's just, in this day and age, and it happens to the best of us. We all make typos, we all make mistakes, but a resume is just one place where it's so easy to send it out to a few people and get a second opinion and just have no errors. I don't work with really anyone that will read a resume or give it a consideration if it has a typo mistake. That's just a kind of a fact of life in any industry. Third, I would say don't get too hung up on job titles, especially in this industry. They really don't mean much. I mean, they do, but they're not always transferable. Someone who's an assistant in one company could be a director in another. Someone who's an assistant in one company could have much more responsibility than a director in another company. So it's really, I'd say, more about building the experience for yourself rather than getting hung up on titles and sort of those kinds of things. And lastly, and I hate to even use this word, but I think it's really important to not fall into the sort of entitled millennial category. A lot of employers and people that are hiring have been working in the art world for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. So if someone comes in with very little experience and expects, major compensation and a huge title, it's immediately, and I'm not saying to sell yourself short in any way, but I think to just be very aware of how you're presenting yourself and having the knowledge about where you might fit into the company. And that's always a good look.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with that for sure. And I hear that a lot from employers. Sorry, lost my battery here. I do hear that a lot from employers, that point, coming in, and it shows maybe not necessarily an awareness for the industry and relationships, which actually is segueing into networking. This is a networking event. We're going to be following the panel chat with a networking event, and I would love to hear your thoughts about that. How important is this in your job search and in your career?
Okay. Yeah, I actually, I just read something recently that resonated with me about, I think he's the director of fashion at YouTube, was interviewed and kind of pointed out, which a lot of you probably are already aware, networking is kind of a daunting word, and it can be somewhat exclusionary to certain personalities. It's not everyone's cup of tea, or you're not naturally a networker. But I've tried to, based on what I read, this other professional suggested it in this article, to think about networking, obviously not as this exchange. I think I have trouble with meeting someone and feeling like it needs to be this professional exchange, and I that feels uncomfortable to me. So reframing in my mind that you can connect with an individual in a professional setting just to connect, just to maybe find out you're both from North Carolina or have something in common. It doesn't have to always be transactional, and to come at it, networking is associated with a lot of pressure and expectation, but to think of it, it's find another word for it in your head so that you're not intimidated by it, because I know I go into a room and don't always want to just, go network with someone, but I do love meeting people. I am very social, so getting that frame of mind in place kind of stood out to me when I read that. It was a good reminder. And then I also had a professor from college remind me that, even if you're young and at the entry level part of your career, you still have something to offer if we're thinking about it from that exchange point of view. I think the intimidation with networking sometimes comes from feeling like you're going into it wanting something from them and not bringing something to the table. You don't let yourself forget that your experiences are unique and you have, whatever you've been studying or doing with your time is interesting to them, and they may connect with you 5-10 years from now. There's no reason to be intimidated by what you're bringing to the table, and to not speak with someone solely because you feel like you're not bringing anything valuable, because you are.
Yeah, no, I agree. Tim.
I once had 5 drinking groups that were all like, one was like formerly known as dance managers, one was like emerging leaders, one was dance managers. Because I'm one of those people, like I pretend to be an extrovert, but I'm really an introvert. So like walking into a room where I don't know anyone is like, fuck, that like really takes it out of me. So finding things like where I'm comfortable. I mean, I can do it, but then I go home and I'm like, that was exhausting. So finding places where I was comfortable. I like curated groups of people that I thought would be really interesting to get together for a drink, and some of these are still going. They didn't meet every week. It wasn't like I was in 5 drinking groups or 5 drinking teams a week, but some would meet like twice a year, one would meet once a year, but it was just a way to stay connected to different groups of people, and then each one in the group would bring someone else, so it wasn't just like dance managers, because like it's a very insular world. Like I want to talk to someone doing cryptocurrency, a scientist, someone who's like, I don't like works for Zappos, because those are where the really interesting things start to play, and that's like where a lot of the really great opportunities show up. It also turns into something that you can probably explain as like something you've done. So tell me about a time, and like actually I created this online television show based off of a conversation I had with some friends, and then it became sort of a calling card. So look for things outside of that, like running groups. If you're a runner, like think about a 5 p.m. running group where you bring together people, or I'm a cyclist, so that it doesn't work as well with cycling. You have to go in one line, so you're like shouting at the person in front of you. But other ways to approximate, it's relationships at the end of the day, and connections, rather than like, oh dear God, there's 500 people here and we're like,
When I think we often forget, like your network are your peers and your family and your friends just as much as they are the strangers in the room. So I think that networking is a scary word because people think it's like this thing you're either good at or bad at, but it is relationships, and the art world is relationships.
There's, to Molly's point, like every 30-year-old person gets to be 30 by like a series of events. Some have like stayed in the arts the entire time. Others had to care for their terminally ill parents and siblings. And it's about the stories and like that, like there's tenacity in all different types of roles, and it's being able to tell your story. And sometimes I'm like, if you don't get it, then fuck it. Like this isn't the place I should work. I know I've dropped the F-bomb like 5 times already. Someone's probably counting. So apologies to whoever. Fuck. So this is why my wife won't let me come to career day. She teaches 3rd grade. It's too risky. But it's like telling that story. It's like everyone's fascinating. It's just learning what the story is and the connections, and that's really what makes life special. And so coming at it with like wherever you are in life, there you are, and you got to be there through experiences that are unique to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think these two nailed it. I take every meeting that's offered to me because I don't know it's a waste of time until afterwards. And then the waste of time, I won't do that again. But I don't know what's going to come out of any meeting, no matter what my preconceptions are. So I try not to have preconceptions. I just take the meeting. Now, of course, there are exceptions. I don't have time. I'm not here, et cetera. But otherwise, I'll take it. And you don't know what's going to happen now during the meeting. Something might come out of it right away. Or something may take a little bit of time to mature and develop. And then in 2 years, 3 years, suddenly it all comes to fruition. So again, I would take every single meeting, and that's on either side. So people contact me for Art Frankly a lot, trying to sell me something. I still take it. We just switched insurance companies, and we saved half the amount of money from a cold call email. I took the meeting. Wasn't a waste of time. Even the other way around, though, in business school we were taught constantly that, I forget who just said this, but there's not a finite amount of social currency to pass out. There's not a finite amount of meetings to take. If you give someone something in one meeting, doesn't mean that you can't give someone else another meeting. So people will take your calls. They will meet with you. You just got to ask. Got to be proactive. And then the one point Molly made on being young and feeling intimidated going up to someone who's been in the industry for a long time. I've always felt, as I've gotten older, that I'm intimidated by younger people when they come talk to me because they have a lot more time than me. They probably know shit that I don't know. Yeah. And here they are in the same place as me right now. So suddenly I'm feeling intimidated, like, wait a minute, am I being aged out? Am I being like pushed out? Like, what's going on here? So that also inspires me to do a little bit more. But yeah, I completely agree with Molly. Do not feel intimidated. Go talk to people.
Yeah.
Again, I feel like everyone's sort of hit this on the head, but I'll just add to that, as they've said, don't ever be afraid to ask someone to go get a coffee or just have a phone call at the very least. Just remember, there's really nothing to lose in reaching out. And in fact, I think people really respect when someone has the nerve to reach out to them, even at a high level. One of the best pieces of advice I had when I was working in the gallery world and dealing with a lot of sort of high profile people, someone just said, remember, people are just people. And that's so true. I mean, people are just people. And I think it's so easy to get worked up in your head about, how things could go wrong or how intimidating they are. But generally people are happy to be approached and happy to sort of talk about themselves. And,
I was just going to say, have your questions ready. I'm a nervous networker, so I have my 5 questions ready.
Yeah.
Let the people talk about themselves and they'll remember me, which is ironic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Hillary, as someone who started their own business, I'm sure, you rely a lot on those relationships that you've cultivated over the years.
Absolutely. I mean, there's nothing more important, I think, than having a network of, former fellow alums from Sotheby's Institute, former colleagues, friends that are in the art world. But it's so important to just keep maintaining that network and growing it, as we've all said. I mean, there's nothing that replaces that, especially in this industry. And for me, some of the best moments I've had in my career are when I have, met new people and then they've referred me to another candidate or a new client. Mm-hmm. So to know that they feel it's been a job well done, and that's the most rewarding thing for me. It means I'm on the right track. And in this industry, your reputation is really everything. So stick to your guns, do the things that you believe in.
And this is a question I get, maybe you can answer. There's that initial contact point. Mm-hmm. How do you maintain your network? What's the upkeep look like with some of these newer relationships? Are you sending an email every 6 months? Are you hoping to bump into them at an opening? Like, what does that relationship kind of look like?
From a business standpoint, I think it's important. I send updates every now and then to sort of the network of people, what's new, what's happening with the business. But beyond that, I'd say go, just being out there, putting yourself out there, going to openings, going to auction previews, kind of saying yes to all the invitations, because that's how you run into people. It's how you keep those relationships going. And we're so lucky to be in New York, because in some cities, on gallery opening nights, you're all spread across the city. In New York, you can, hit 5 or 6 or 10 and you see everyone. I feel like it's so just, put yourself out there, even if it's pouring rain. I mean, just go, get yourself out there. Yeah, exactly,
and you're all
like
here.
You've all done tonight. Just like, kind of keep at it and yeah.
Okay. Great. Josie, yeah.
I was just going to say, I kind of hate those emails when I get from people like, oh, just staying in touch. It's like, all right, dude, just call me or meet up, or like, don't worry about it. Like, I'll be cool when you finally need me in 3 months. But that's kind of the important part of building relationships, is that then you don't have to do these emails every 6 months. Like, I have, like, the guy who founded Art, I've known him for 10 years. We talk twice a year maybe, but like, it's not an issue. I call him with a need, he helps me out, or vice versa. And building those good relationships allows for that to occur. So.
Questions, but I want to hear your final thoughts. I know I went a little off script. If there was any like burning things that you wanted to talk about, or any final thoughts that you wanted to share with the room, and we'll start with you, Molly.
Just to get into something more tangible on the actual classifieds board, we hear from folks. We've done some small focus group type interviews, and we hear from advertisers that they look at maybe the first few pages and then get discouraged that the listing has been up. Oh, it's on page 4 or 5. Probably has tons of applicants. I'm not going to bother. That is not the case. This was touched on earlier, that there are listings that get looked over for that exact reason. NYFA gets 30 plus listings a day. That moves you off that first page so quickly as an advertiser. So if you are looking to apply and you see, we usually have 19 pages of listings, they will remove their listing when they are no longer looking for applicants. They will take it down, or they will change it. They will edit that application deadline. They are pretty diligent about that, or will email us and say, we found someone, how do we take it down? So I would encourage folks that are actively looking on the board right now, or will be in the future, to if it's been posted for 2 weeks but it is still on that board, they are more than likely still looking for applicants. So I wouldn't dismiss them. If that job looks like a great fit for you, submit your information. And another thought I had earlier was just to kind of break down, once you're maybe more of like a mid-career change, would be breaking it down, keeping your resume updated as regularly as you can, and then not feeling like, I need to change jobs tomorrow because I'm getting discouraged, but doing it in chunks. This week I'm going to focus on my resume. Next week, let's tackle some cover letters. Let's compile a list of NYFA jobs that I'm really interested in, and just break it down, compartmentalize, because as a whole, the job search is very daunting, but I think, easing yourself into it and preparing yourself piece by piece to be ready to apply when something comes along that is a good fit would be my advice.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great advice, Molly. It's like, look, get a new job. You're like, oh dear God. It's like, but breaking it, you feel like you have some agency and you're making some movement. And sometimes you're like, actually, that's all I needed.
Right.
It's just that feeling to have the agency. I think there are three things. We talked about resume a lot, and not specifically cover letter. When we post for a role at Fracture House, we get on average like 300 to 400 people apply. And so we have a process for putting those through a pipeline or a gauntlet. But like the amount of time that I can imagine people spend on their cover letter versus how much time they put, or their resume versus how much time they put on their cover letter, it's like I can tell they talk to like 100 people about their cover or their resume, and it's beautiful. And then their cover letter is like find and replace, and they really didn't spend that much time, and it really doesn't talk about them at Fractured Atlas. And I'm like, okay, well, you're undercutting your candidacy here. So I think like spending time, not applying to everything, but like, do I really see myself working there? Can I see myself there? And then writing a cover letter that actually explains that. So it's not just like, it's really obvious when you read enough of them, they're just finding and replacing the name of the company and the name of the role, and they're really excited to work at fill in the blank company. Mm-hmm. So there's that. I think a practical tip that I use is every question that I've ever received in a job interview or any interview, I write it down on a note card, and then I write my answer on the back. And then before I go into any interview, I flip through them. I mean, this is old school, right? It's like I've got like a stack of note cards. Like and then every time I come out of a job interview, I write down all the questions that I haven't received before. Because when you get in a job interview, unless you're like really cool, like you get nervous and you're like, oh, I forgot, that wasn't exactly how I wanted to put it or wanted to say. And so it allows you to flip through, and then it sort of calms you into that mode. Lastly, if you are a white person and you're not doing personal work around racism, oppression, white supremacy, culture, white fragility, you will be left behind, rightfully. And this is tough work for us to do, but in this day and age, in the work that we're doing, it is required. And in our organization, we have questions, and we are an organization dedicated to anti-racism, anti-oppression, and there are questions, and it's very obvious who can talk about it. And who can't. And so I encourage you, there's lots of places to go. So you want to talk about race, is a great book. White Fragility, great book. Seeing White is a podcast series, 14-part series, incredible. So I encourage you, there's a lot of places to go. But I think this is something that doesn't get mentioned very often that I think is work that we need to do.
Thank you, yeah.
Let's talk about technology and innovation a little bit. In my day-to-day work for a couple of companies I work for or own, we do a lot of web development and design, which I really enjoy. when we design a website, we design it for mobile first, meaning we disregard what the desktop's going to look like. We simply focus on what mobile is going to look like. That's because people use mobile about half the time, maybe a little bit more than half the time now. I remember just 10 years ago, a little bit after I graduated from college in '08, the thought of using websites on my phone just was not appealing, didn't seem like it was going to happen. Then 10 years later, suddenly it's all we do is we sit in websites on our phone. In the same way, you know, the arts are slowly, but they are changing because of technology, and technology is being adopted more and more across all different types of businesses and institutions. That means that jobs are going to be changing. That means that skills needed are going to be changing. We had a job from David Zwerner recently for an online sales position. I think it was an entry level or just intermediate level. They couldn't fill it because no one seemed interested or had the know-how to manage that aspect of their business. That aspect of their business is growing and growing and growing. I don't know what the percentage of online sales are now. It's low. But just like using your mobile phone to check out websites was non-existent almost in '06, '07, '08, that completely changed in 10 years. So if we're sitting at whatever the percentage is now, my guess is like a volume, maybe like 10% or something, maybe someone else knows, but that's going to double next year, that's going to triple the year after that, and suddenly we're going to find that the only things that are sold, maybe there won't be fairs in the future, but maybe the only things that are sold at auction or live are, 15, 20 million plus pieces. Everything else is going to be sold online. So check out that job post. I think they filled it already. But check out that job post. Look at the skills they were asking for. Those are skills that you can go learn. It's not very hard. Google it. There are free online videos that will teach you how to use all these different technologies, from Google Analytics to Google AdWords to LinkedIn advertising, Facebook advertising, Instagram advertising. These are all skills that are out there and wanted and needed and can easily be learned. And if you go ahead and do those things, suddenly you may find yourself, you have access to a job you weren't necessarily planning on doing, but that was an institution that you wanted to work in. So suddenly you've kind of got yourself in the back door by learning some new skills. And then once you're there, like I was saying before, you'll be around everything you want to be around. You'll see what you want to see. You'll meet the people you want to meet. And then you can take it from there. I really focus on how technology is affecting the art world and how you might benefit from that. Because the people who move first are the people who win.
Can I say that is exactly my career path? Like I studied art history and was kind of mortified that I wasn't entering the art world immediately. But I went and worked for an agency that taught me AdWords, analytics, digital marketing, and then an arts organization needed someone to do that. So going about it, I know I already mentioned that, but it wasn't how I saw it, my 5-year plan, but it worked out, having those skill sets, stepping outside of the industry, getting those hard skills that I knew were going to be valuable, and stepping back into the world I wanted to be a part of.
Thank you.
I'll just say in closing too, on top of persistence and all that, I'd just say one of the values that I, try to uphold with myself and my company that I think is important for candidates to remember is, when you're going into any job search, even if it's your dream job, just make sure you know who you'll be working for, what the culture is. Don't be, just make sure you know what you're stepping into, because that at the end of the day is what will make it succeed or not. And I think it's so incredibly important for people in any industry, especially this one, to have a mentor, someone around them that will lift them up, not put them down, someone that will, teach them confidence and let them grow. So be just, step carefully. And if you know anyone in that industry or anyone in that company or anyone that knows anyone, just get as much information as you can, because what works for one person might really not work for another. But I think more than anything, very important to have someone to kind of guide you, so you're not doing it all on your own. I think that would be my advice on what to look for, number one.
I think it's clear that there are 5 allies up here in that area as well. I wanted to turn it over to all of you to ask your questions. So yes, any raise your hand, and I think there's a microphone going around. Oh, yes, you may have mine. Does anyone have questions?
Hi, my name's Amanda Chambers-Burt, and this was a great panel. Thank you for everyone. So I have 2 questions. One is, are business cards obsolete? Should you just connect through LinkedIn? And my second question is, how do you break out of the internship cycle? Like post-graduation, you do an internship, and you're just like stuck in that rut? Those are my questions. Thank you.
In terms of business cards, and I don't know if you guys will agree with me or not, but I think especially on the side of the candidate, they're not obsolete. I think if you can ask someone for it, that's ideal, because then you have their contact information. And as you all probably know, it can be very difficult to get that information otherwise. So if you have the opportunity to ask for it, because then it's there in hand, where if you're looking for it online, sometimes you can find it, sometimes you can cold call, but more often than not, just to have it in pocket is always helpful.
Yeah, it's old school. Do it.
Old school, but do it.
I think it's also helpful that, I mean, in LinkedIn, you couldn't note how you met them, like on the back of a note card, just writing how you met them, what you talked about, and then following up with those exact points makes a note or a business card irreplaceable in some ways.
Yeah, I'd also look at it when someone gives it to you. Because usually, I mean, I've tried to take my own advice here. Because usually, like, give me your business card and I put it in my pocket and like we're talking. But like to actually stop and like take a look at it, I think is sort of respectful. And also, you pick up things. Like sometimes I might not have heard your name because it's loud, and but when you get it, you're like you can say great to meet you. And then yes, like if you meet 10 people, I can't remember on LinkedIn. So it's a nice breadcrumb trail. And there's when Mike Bloomberg was just elected mayor way back when for New York, there was an article I think it was in the Times, that talked about like he meets a lot of people, probably still does. And whenever he met someone, they would hand him, he would get their business card, and if he folded it and put it in his pocket, it meant that he was going to get back to them. But if he didn't, it meant that he wasn't. And so I like to imagine, like, after that article came out, it's like, now he's got to change his system, like dog ear the side of it. But sometimes that's like, all right, the notes certainly, but also like, should I get back to, whatever. So if you meet Mike Bloomberg, hand him your business card just to see what he does with it.
And I think the other one was around internships. The internship.
I mean, that's kind of I would say the best thing you can do is just be persistent. People really appreciate that. And if you are in an intern situation, it can be frustrating. But the people that work, and I know this is sort of, it's kind of old school advice, but like get there first, leave last, ask everyone what you can do. And even if you're doing all those things and it seems fruitless, in the end, it's not, because people do notice. And I think the more experience you gain, the better. Some of us have touched on sort of editing your resume specifically to the job you're applying for. So really digging deep and thinking like, what have I done that seems like this? And it may not be clear, right at the beginning, but the more experience you gain, I think you can think about how to sort of edit your resume and apply for a job in a way that really makes you a great candidate for that job, and not just, a general intern. But what have you done specifically that makes you, a great candidate for that role?
Hello. I also think with internships, you're okay to reach back out to old internships and let them know you're job hunting, because people like to hire their old interns. They know you. They have a relationship with you. I happen to know an employer in New York where a majority of their hires are former interns, and it might not be an immediately, intern to full-time role. It's 6 months, 12 months, a couple years later.
I think it was the research that Adam Grant, organizational psychologist from Wharton, provided, where it talked about dormant ties. People that you haven't talked to for like 2 to 5 years. There's people we talk to every day. There's the people we've sort of lost track of, but they're still Facebook friends or they're still on LinkedIn. But like the dormant ties are the people who know you. So like you had an internship there before. Who might it might be good to check in with them, because they might hear of things. It's that circle that we often think, oh, I know exactly what they would say. But in the 4 years that you've not talked to them, they've also had 4 years when they've not talked to you, and so they've grown in different networks. So as you're looking at that's like, besides your immediate people, that's a great place to set up, a quick Zoom call to check in how you've been. Also maybe send cards. No one sends cards nowadays. Like if it's like, I was just thinking about you, I included this like printed article. Like that's so old school, but it's like, usually you just get mail from, I don't know, Chase Bank and, places you don't get mail from. So those are little things, little details that make you stand out and make you show that you sort of appreciate the value and the time that people take.
I would just add one more thing. Find job openings that match your skills. So go over your resume again. find the skills that are actually going to add value to that organization. Because remember, everyone's salary is more usually directly related to how much business they're bringing in or creating. So I would touch up your resume again, look at the vocabulary you use, look at some jobs that value certain skills you have, and go after those as a stepping stone, yeah.
And are you using NYFA classifieds?
I'm using NYFA classifieds, and I have an Artfully profile.
Love it. Are you using the advanced search filter?
Not all the time. I feel like when I use the advanced search, it like blinks out, so I kind of leave it.
Ignore that. No. No.
Maybe I'm too advanced.
Maybe. No, I got that impression. No, I was thinking, that you can filter down to entry level immediately and just each day kind of say, all right, what's new? Is it entry level, or is it, going to be that post internship move? Narrow it down so that you're not feeling, overwhelmed. You can kind of keep an active pulse. And then to the mobile friendly point, check on the subway, and filter down so that you're looking at exactly what in those filters ties to what you're looking for to get out of that intern cycle.
Hi, sorry. My name is Michelle Guevara. I have a long-winded question that has a bit of questions in it, and also thank you for sharing everything. I have a question about the application process and kind of the people on the other end. I don't really have that much of an issue finding jobs. It's more of applying to jobs. So in a bit of a backstory, I'm 28 now. I graduated with art history, and when I first finished school, I was working in a lot of curatorial assistant jobs and things like that. And part of the issue was kind of a lack of growth with like responsibility and money without a master's degree. Although like looking around, the kind of things that the people were doing around me were pretty in my reach, and I felt like I'd be really good at it. So I was doing that for a while, and then I live in New York City. I'm from here, and I wasn't really making enough to sustain. So luckily, my family has a real estate development company. I just kind of started working there doing property management. So I do that for work, but I'm working as an art producer at the Queen's Council of the Arts, which is amazing, and I manage a lot of money, and I work with artists, but it's completely unpaid. So now at 28, I've learned like a lot of skills in real estate, and I'm doing things I love in the arts, but I'm not making money in it. So I'm kind of not sure how can you find a career that like you can feel challenged in. Like I feel like I'm interested in the arts, but I'm also really entrepreneurial, etc. But my entrepreneurial skills are from real estate, but I have a great eye. Like it's kind of just like I know that there's these roles that I see, and I know I could be fantastic at them. It just how can I show that through a limited resume and cover letter? Through
You manage a building right now?
22 buildings.
You manage 22 buildings?
Yeah.
Artist residencies and studios look for managers also that probably rely on a lot of skills that
Right.
cross over. So again, going back to my point before that I said to you and before, look at what you're doing in the real estate company and try to translate that into vocabulary that will impress in the art world. And I guarantee you, if you sit down for a little while and have someone help you, you'll be able to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is it through that then eventually? Because my dream is kind of to do like art, community arts, like networking, connecting, kind of things like that. Like I feel like I do project management, which relates to event planning. Like is that a stretch or is it?
When you said you manage buildings, I assume that's probably a lot more complicated and difficult than.
Yeah, hundreds of vendors, all these things.
Yeah.
Like it's totally transferable,
so
but it's not art.
Sell that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what is what do you look for in a cover letter? Because I spend like days on my cover letter, and I'm like sending it to all my friends, deleting it. Like I don't know if you could give me an equation for the perfect cover letter. Send me a lot of sleepless nights.
Yeah.
I want that too.
Yeah, thank you.
You know that I think sometimes it's attributed to Mark Twain. It's like I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you a long one. And so I do that. It's like you have a quick question, I'll send you a really long email because it's the fastest thing for me to do. It takes time, and so I can only speak for myself and my experience, sort of on the other side of the table. I'm looking at 300 to 400 resumes, to 400 packages. So that's a resume, that's a cover letter, and maybe a writing sample. And I've got like other things I need to do. Like I'm not just the HR person, so I've got other stuff in my day, and so it's unfortunate. But like you've got to figure out how you can get quickly through there. And I should also say this is why we sort of triangulate on our staff. There's at least 3 people who look at application packets, because I might spend my time on the cover letter, Nathan might spend his time on the resume, and Jillian might spend her time on something else. And then we pick up different things. So it's not just like, my bias and me quickly moving through there, but like, you see him come up and you're like, oh God, it's like a quarter to half inch margin, and it's like really tight, and it's probably 10-point font. And then it just becomes like, I'm getting a sense for what this letter is, because I can't read the whole thing. This is probably like a 10-minute thing for me to read. So the ones that really stand out, well, there was one that said, I was sitting on the very first line, said, I was sitting on my couch and I said, holy shit, Fractured Atlas is hiring. So I thought, all right, we'll like put them in the next round. But besides that one, I think it was holy shit, I told my husband Fractured Atlas is hiring, something to that effect. But as you read enough of them, you're like, actually, this person can see themselves in this role, and can see themselves in this organization, and can add something new. They know what they can add to it, and it's not, there's probably hundreds of ones that have come in. They're like, search no further, I'm the person you're looking for. Probably not. But it's not that. It's like, and this is what takes time, and this is where we're like, all right, I really want to apply for this job. I really think it's not, and I should also say, I've done like the find and replace like cover letters before. I've gotten jobs from that, but in a really competitive environment, taking the time to actually understand those things and to put it into a letter really concisely, is what stands out when I look at them, and I know from my colleagues at Fracture Atlas is as well.
So how do you do this? Like, I want to tell them everything, right? But you can't tell them everything.
It's a marketing. Think of it as marketing. Like, an advertisement doesn't tell you everything you need to know about this piece of clothing. It just like gets you interested to go to the website to check out. So it's like, this is what a cover letter and resume is about. It's just like getting people interested enough to have a conversation with you, and that's when you start to. I mean, same thing on a job site. I mean, the number of people who are like 7-page posting for like what this like development assistant is, like, oh dear God, like that. It's like, what's going to find and connect with the people who really see themselves in it, and then let's take the interview process to learn more about each other and sort of this like the layers of the onion, I guess. So don't feel like you need to tell everything, because it'll backfire probably.
Well, and a good place to start is the job description. The cover letter is more or less written for you in a job description. It's just tying yourself into that with your skills.
Yeah, I would just add, the cover letter is kind of about you, and kind of about the company, and kind of about the company and you. So if you can formulate that, and then, like you said, get it down to be short, which is difficult, do that. I don't read cover letters. I think it's bullshit. I don't read cover letters. When I'm applying for jobs on LinkedIn, I only look at jobs that do easy apply, so I don't have to do a cover letter, because I think it's bullshit. But that's just me. My business partner does read them.
I would just highlight too, I think that marketing point is really interesting, and I have a friend who's in marketing who is a wizard with words. Like, he's a goofball, but when it came to looking at my resume or just speaking about himself in a succinct but powerful way, he killed it. So if you have a friend in marketing, hand it to them. That I do that every time I have I call him up and say, take a look, he loves it. Just finding what, it's like word weaving. He's not a poet, but he's a marketing person, and he does this well. So if you have a marketing friend, run it by them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, in the arts, in the fine arts, like you said, a lot of it is based on networking. But sometimes I feel like I can get like exhausted from networking, because there's open studios, then there's the festival, the art festival, and then some of them are different parts of the world. And then in the spring there's these events, and in the fall there's these events, and then sometimes so there's just so much stuff. And what is like is there going to be an event coming up where we could like meet, other than today, we could like meet the curators, we could meet people that hire artists, something more streamlined? I don't know, you think? That's not as sporadic, where you go on Eventbrite, you don't know what's going to be there this week, next week. So like the networking is good, but it's like you don't know who you're going to meet each month.
I just want to say quickly before I'm sure some other people have more succinct answers than me, but like networking never ends, right? Like that does not end ever. So get used to it. But also it depends like how you look at these events. If you're looking at them, going in there, being like, all right, here's what I got to accomplish. Got to meet this many people, and got to meet this curator, and that's not, in my opinion, how you should be looking at it. You should try to like enjoy these openings, etc. Go there for the art, know who the curator is, maybe Google a picture of her so you know what she looks like, then go chat with her at the show, even for 5 minutes. You don't have to sit there for like an hour and like grill her about it. He or she will not want to do that, but yeah, just know where you're going, who you're going to talk to, and just make it brief and try to enjoy yourself.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that completely, because often these events are very, they're great, just experiences in general without the networking side of it. But if you want to work in the art world, you're going to have to network, and it is exhausting, and it is on a cyclical schedule, but it's an international world, so if people are in town, you've got to meet them. The art fairs are everywhere, and if that's the sooner you can get used to it, the better, because it's a grind. It is, but a fun one. I mean, it's the arts. You have like Josie said, you have something to enjoy at least while you're doing it. So.
I was going to ask whether you're a member of the YPA, because they have an awesome newsletter that goes out that shares events, and that's a really strong little community of folks that would go to events that are probably right up your alley on a regular basis, share them with you. You get to know folks, and you get to know folks through them, and you have that recurring email coming into your inbox reminding you of what's happening, and you know that you'll see people you know and also meet new people, so there's a level of comfort there. And also, it's curated by my two brilliant friends. And so I think, that's a good place to start for some consistent updates on events and a community to build.
As you were talking, I sort of thought, like, would you go see every movie? Unless you're like a film buff, would you go see every movie that's out? No, you'd be like selective. Like if you miss it, maybe you'll catch it on Netflix or something. And it's oftentimes we feel like we're going to miss out. Like if I'm not there, then these people are going to be there, and then otherwise. But there are like 7 billion people on the world, and like curating like what does this look like, and when do I show up, and what do I actually want to do? And I think like, do I enjoy it? Because if not, it's gonna it's gonna show, right? Like if we're ever like talking to people we really don't want to be talking to, and I think that's great advice to like just curate what you want your life to look like and who you want to interact with. And I'm positive that those connections start to form, and usually, being open to things that take you in like the general direction of where you want to go, but not a prescriptive way. I got friends who lost out on, who now we're in our 40s, and they're like, I thought I knew what my career path was, and I held to that so strongly that I missed all of these other opportunities that came my way. And then I have some that were like, I just thought it was going to be like an awesome ride. So like I said yes to this, I said yes to that, and then I ended up here, and I like had no idea I would get here. And so I think that same thing for networking, like just show up and meet people in cool places where you want to be, and then it sort of goes from there.
So we have time. So we have time for one more question, but while we're talking about networking, I hope you all stick around afterwards for a networking activity and get to know each other, because your network is starting in this room. And then one other little announcement. We have an online course at Sotheby's Institute this summer called Careers in the Art World. If you want to dig deeper, please feel free to email online at sia.edu. And we can take one more question out there.
Hi, I'm Roberta from Mexico, and how, since you all started in your own company or your own work, how do you make people believe in what you're doing from the start? Like, I'm starting my own thing down in Mexico and trying to promote local artists and working with museums and galleries, but how do you make yourself so people can believe in what you're doing, so it can become a job? I don't know if I've made myself clear. Yeah, thank you.
I think on a sort of really simple level, just sticking, having your values as a company and as a person and really sticking to them. I think people, when they start a business, can become desperate in some ways. And if you stay true to kind of what your values are and what your company values are, people will see that. And if they feel they can trust you over time. I mean, I think that's the most basic, most important thing that you can do, to just gain the trust. And I'll let someone else sort of speak to the marketing aspect of all of that. But
yeah, I mean, just from like an entrepreneurial point of view, it's tough. It's really, really tough. And there are a lot of highs. You know, we had highs when the website launched and when we raised our first 200,000 and, you know, when we hit 5,000 members, et cetera. But there are a lot more lows and they are way, way, way lower. And it's tough. It's very tough and doesn't seem like people are taking you seriously. It seems like all the hard work you've put in is coming to nothing. But you have to persevere. You have to realize anything you've been doing wrong and try to correct that, and then try to increase the activities that are working. If there's positivity around you from friends or family or network, try to include that as much as possible. But you just got to keep your head down and keep working and believe in yourself. That was so cheesy.
I think this is where resilience and self-care comes into play. And it's like stuff we usually say for a rainy day that never comes, even though it's like raining today. But like, what are resilience strategies? Like, do we meditate? Do we run? Do we like pray? And self-care, because yeah, it's like really rough. Like, especially like this is something you really care about. This is part of you, and people are gonna be like, I've seen it before, not really for me. One of my architect friends recently, or a couple years ago actually, was talking about like the 3 ways you can get people to do something, and it's like inspire, motivate, and coerce. And you try to get the most people in motivate and inspire. Like, this is what it's going to look like, and then like the rest, in the middle is like motivate. All right, so you need a bit more incentive to do it, and then at the bottom, there's always going to be people you have to coerce. And I've really come to think like you're never going to change that bucket of coerce. Like, you just need to like fuck them and move on, because like 100 people, 100% of people aren't going to be engaged with it, and like the emotional and psychological toil that it would take, and that's where I think the resilience and self-care strategy comes in, to really see that. And so yeah, I don't think I said anything that was like a T-shirt. That was awesome. Like, what they're making T-shirts out there with like your name, you can sign them. But that was terrific all the same.
Great. Well, I just want to thank each and every one of you guys. This has been a real joy, and all of you for being here on a rainy day, on a Tuesday. Yes, and enjoy yourselves. Networking event will take place out in the Commons here. Thank you again.
That was excellent. Out of your way. Come have a glass of wine.